At Thanksgiving dinner, my brother's wife handed out gifts to everyone at the table except me. And my brother? He laughed. That was the moment I realized I was never truly part of this family. But what they didn't know was that this moment would ignite something far greater. This is not just a story of betrayal, it's a journey of truth, redemption, and building a life where you no longer ask to be seen, you claim it. My name is Noah Walsh. I'm 33, single, and a data analyst for a mid-sized insurance firm in Portland, Maine. Most people would call me dependable, quiet, maybe even a little boring. I work hard, pay my bills, and always send thank you notes. And yet somehow I've spent most of my adult life being the punchline in my own family's dinner conversations. Not maliciously, not openly, but subtly, steadily, like the slow drip of a leaky faucet that eventually floods the room. And tonight, as I sat at the far end of my parents' Thanksgiving table, that drip became a downpour. The clatter of silverware and hum of muted conversation filled the dining room as the Thanksgiving feast wound down. Noah sat at the far end of the long oak table, nursing a lukewarm coffee and watching the slow dance of candlelight reflecting off polished wine glasses. The turkey had been carved to the bone, the stuffing devoured the cranberry sauce, only a congealed smear in a cut glass bowl. He glanced across the table where Lindsay, his sister-in-law, stood with an exaggerated smile balancing a stack of festively wrapped boxes. Her perfectly curled blonde hair and tailored cream sweater made her look like she stepped out of a holiday commercial. One by one, she handed out the gifts to his mother Esther, his father Louis, his nieces, and even the new boyfriend of a cousin. Noah's hands remained empty. "Oops," Lindsay said with theatrical innocence. "Did I forget someone, Adam?" His older brother let out a snorting laugh, the kind that was more bark than humor. "Guess Santa doesn't visit cubicle elves," he quipped, and several people chuckled, not because it was funny, but because laughing at Noah had become tradition. Noah's throat tightened, but he forced a smile. The room dimmed just a bit in his eyes. His chest ached with something he couldn't quite name, something that had lived there for years. He swallowed hard and stood. "Bathroom," he muttered and walked away, not trusting himself to speak. In the hallway, the distant laughter echoed like a cruel reminder. He leaned against the wall near the coat closet and exhaled slowly. A mirror above a side table reflected his image, button-down shirt wrinkled from sitting too long, tired eyes that no amount of sleep could fix. He looked like a man who had tried too hard for too long. Noah had always been the quiet one, the dependable one, the one who showed up early and stayed late. But in this house, his childhood home, he had become invisible. He used to think it was his imagination. But today, as Lindsay skipped his name and Adam laughed, it landed like a verdict. He remembered when this house smelled like cinnamon and hope, when his mother's hugs were tighter and his father's jokes weren't so distracted. Now warmth had turned brittle. Conversations felt like performances. Love like a quota he never qualified for. Back at the table, Lindsay was recounting a shopping trip to New York, name-dropping designers and wealthy clients. Noah sat down quietly, unnoticed. He wondered if he could vanish completely. Would they even pause? Esther smiled absently at Lindsay's story. Louis nodded but glanced occasionally at the TV in the adjoining room. Adam basked in the attention, one arm draped behind Lindsay's chair, the other clutching a beer. To everyone else, this was family. To Noah, it was exile in plain sight. He reached for the pie tray and cut himself a small slice of pumpkin pie, more out of habit than hunger. The taste was bland. Everything was. Then came the question from his youngest niece, Uncle Noah. "What did you get from Aunt Lindsay?" He paused. Every eye turned toward him. Lindsay feigned confusion. "Oh no, I must have forgotten." "So sorry, Noah. I guess I just didn't have you on my list." Adam chuckled again. "Maybe next year, bro." Noah nodded. Sure, he said quietly and pushed his plate aside. It wasn't about the gift, not really. It was about the message: you don't belong. Noah sat through the rest of the evening like a ghost in the room. He helped clear plates, stacked dishes in the kitchen, even scrubbed pans, while Lindsay gossiped and Adam checked football scores. His parents thanked him with vague smiles, as if grateful he knew how to stay out of the way. When he finally left, the night was cold and the stars felt impossibly far away. As he walked to his car, Noah made a decision. Not a loud one, not a movie-style resolution. Just a quiet click inside him. Something has to change. He started the engine headlights washing over the driveway and whispered to himself, "Next year, I bring the truth." And deep down, he knew he already had it. When I first returned to our small hometown after college, I thought I was coming back to something safe, familiar, a place where I could belong again. Portland had been kind to me: long walks through the Eastern Promenade, weekend trivia nights, an apartment filled with peace. But something in me yearned for the steady rhythm of home. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could slide back into the life I left behind and be welcomed with open arms. I was wrong. Adam, my older brother, had always been the golden boy. Star quarterback turned successful contractor, the kind of guy who made people lean in when he talked. And Lindsay, she fit the role of his wife like she'd been cast for it. Elegant, sharp-tongued, with a veneer of warmth that cracked the moment you stepped out of line. Together they were the family favorites. I, on the other hand, was the guy who crunched numbers behind a desk. They never said it outright, not at first. But the jokes came slow and biting. "Hope the excitement of spreadsheets doesn't keep you up at night," Adam would tease at Sunday dinners. "He's in insurance," Lindsay would say with mock awe to their friends. "You know, the thrilling kind of risk management." I laughed along at first. You do that when you're desperate to belong, but over time their words chipped away at me. It wasn't just the teasing, it was the erasure. Family outings happened without me. Kayaking trips, barbecues, even birthday dinners, all documented in smiling photos posted online. I'd see them after the fact, sitting alone in my apartment with a half-eaten dinner, wondering if I had missed a message or an invitation. I hadn't. When I confronted Adam once, he shrugged. "We figured you'd be working. You're always busy, right?" Lindsay added. "Besides, you don't seem like the hiking type." And maybe I wasn't. But that wasn't the point. I brought cupcakes once to a family brunch, spending hours the night before perfecting a lemon buttercream recipe I found online. Lindsay took one bite and said, "They're good, Noah. But next time try almond extract. It really elevates the flavor." Adam chuckled and added, "Or just buy them from that place on Elm. Saves time." My parents never corrected them. They'd change the subject, offer me another serving, and tell me I was doing great, but they never stood up for me. Not when Adam interrupted me mid-story to talk about his new truck. Not when Lindsay called my apartment quaint. Not when I showed up early to decorate for Mom's birthday, only to be handed a mop and told to clean up the mess from the party the night before, a party I hadn't been invited to. Still, I kept coming back. It's strange the way hope can survive in silence. Every dinner, every holiday, every awkward family gathering, I held on to the idea that maybe this time would be different. That they'd see me, really see me. But every time I left a little more invisible. The worst part wasn't the exclusion. It was how they made me question my own worth. One Christmas Eve, we sat around the fireplace exchanging stories. I started to talk about a project I led at work, a major data migration that had saved the company thousands. Halfway through, Lindsay interrupted with a story about a celebrity client at her boutique. Adam followed up with a joke about tax brackets and how I probably calculated fun in Excel. The conversation moved on without me. I smiled and nodded. That's what I did. That's what I had learned to do, but something in me started to shift, a quiet awareness like the first crack in a frozen lake. I began noticing the patterns, the way Adam's voice always filled the room, the way Lindsay's compliments always came with a sting, the way my parents praised them openly and me in hushed tones as if love had to be rationed. I stopped telling them things, stopped trying to compete. I let the silence grow. Looking back now, those were the invisible years. Not because I wasn't present, but because I wasn't seen. I was the extra chair at the table, the background noise to their show. And yet I stayed, because somewhere beneath the hurt was the belief that family was supposed to be forever. It wasn't until the Thanksgiving dinner when Lindsay skipped me and Adam laughed that I realized forever isn't unconditional. It's built, nurtured, fought for, and maybe, just maybe, it was time I stopped fighting for people who never fought for me. If there was a moment that fully captured the absurdity of trying to matter in a space that constantly overlooked you, it was the day I brought homemade cookies to Lindsay's spring brunch. I had spent the night before trying out a new brown butter chocolate chip recipe. I'd measured the flour carefully, chilled the dough overnight, even sprinkled a pinch of sea salt on top just before baking. It was small, sure, but it felt like a way in a gesture. Lindsay took a bite, smiled stiffly, and said, "They're sweet, Noah, but next time maybe a little less butter. It makes them kind of greasy." Adam laughed. "Guess the spreadsheets don't come with baking tips." That laughter again, not cruel but dismissive, the kind that made you feel like a well-meaning toddler in a room full of adults. I forced a laugh and excused myself to help Mom in the kitchen. She let me dry dishes while she washed both of us, working in silence, as Lindsay's laughter echoed from the dining room. The next week I brought over takeout instead. Nobody noticed. It wasn't just the cookies, it was how every attempt I made, no matter how small, seemed to dissolve into irrelevance. One summer I offered to mow my parents' lawn while Dad was recovering from knee surgery. Adam showed up later that afternoon, beer in hand, and told me I'd missed a patch near the fence. "Leave the landscaping to the guys who don't mind getting dirt under their nails," he said. Lindsay added, "You're sweet to try, though. Sweet. Not helpful. Not thoughtful. Just sweet. Like a child who colored outside the lines but meant well." I started showing up early to family events to help set up carrying chairs, decorating running errands. By the time everyone else arrived, the work was done and I became invisible again. Once I spent a Sunday helping Mom clean out the garage. We uncovered boxes of my old schoolwork photos from summer camps, even a dusty shoebox filled with birthday cards I'd made as a kid. She smiled at the memories, but by dinner time it was Adam and Lindsay getting the spotlight for arriving with a bottle of imported wine. No mention of the hours I'd spent sweating in the July heat. The pattern was always the same, my efforts were background noise. Adam, meanwhile, brought loud jokes and big stories, remodeling projects. Client drama, a vacation in Maui. Lindsay backed him with theatrical anecdotes about managing high-end clients at her boutique. Her voice perfectly pitched to hold a room and me. I talked about a new report at work once, only for Adam to interrupt. "You guys hear about that time my crew hit a gas line?" The whole block reeked for days. By the time the laughter died down, my story was forgotten. So I stopped sharing. There's a kind of silence that builds in layers. You don't start out quiet. You get quiet because the noise around you never leaves space. The worst part was how little they seemed to notice. At one point I bought concert tickets for Dad and me, a blues musician he loved in college. We drove 2 hours to Boston. During the ride home, he thanked me. That was it. When we got back, Lindsay asked, "You two went all the way to Boston for that?" "You must really not have much going on," Adam added. "Next time, take Mom to something fun like a musical." She falls asleep during guitar solos. They laughed. Dad said nothing. It wasn't just my feelings being overlooked, it was my presence. As if I could put in time, effort, even money, and still fade behind the brightness of their performance. So I withdrew. Not all at once. Just enough. I stopped trying to bake. I stopped volunteering for errands. I still showed up, always did, but with less to say, less to offer. And nobody asked why. When someone asked me once during a 4th of July party why I wasn't seeing anyone, I started to answer something honest, maybe even vulnerable. But Lindsay cut in. Don't worry, we'll set him up with someone eventually. Someone who also reads fine print for fun. More laughter. I smiled and nodded. That's what I did. That's what I had learned to do, but part of me, the part that still believed in connection, was cracking. Not with rage, not even with sadness, just with the quiet ache of not being missed. Looking back, I think the cookies were the last try, the last real effort to bridge something that kept crumbling no matter how carefully I built. I left the next brunch without saying goodbye. No one called to ask why. It started on a Tuesday, just a regular gray sky mid-autumn Tuesday. I was grabbing coffee at Marlowe's, the little cafe near the office where I sometimes went to feel like I wasn't eating lunch alone. The tables were crowded that day, so I squeezed into a corner with my laptop, hoping to finish up some reports before heading back. 2 tables over, I recognized the voice before the face. Kyla. She used to be a year behind me in high school, smart, quiet glasses always slipping down her nose. Now she was dressed in business casual and sipping chai like she ran the world. She was talking to a friend, voice low. But the cafe's acoustics made privacy a joke. Lindsay's boutique is bleeding cash, Kyla said. They've been moving money around using Adam's business to cover payroll. It's messy. My hands froze over the keyboard. My brain stumbled. I didn't move, just listened. I told her we need real financial controls. Kyla continued, but she thinks branding can fix everything. And Adam? He just nods like it's fine. Her friend said something I didn't catch. Then laughter. Then the conversation shifted, but I couldn't unhear what I'd heard. That night I sat in my apartment staring at the ceiling. Not angry, not even surprised, just awake. All the moments, the snide remarks, the lavish parties, the performative generosity, they made more sense. The pieces were there, scattered through years of being ignored. I just hadn't seen the pattern. And now I did. The next day I started small, a public business search. Adam's contracting company had a few recent reviews on Yelp. Most were glowing, 2 weren't. 1 mentioned unexplained charges and unresponsive billing. Curious, I followed the rabbit hole. Property records, business filings, tax assessments. It was all out there, hidden in plain sight. I wasn't looking to destroy anyone, not yet. I just wanted to know the truth. After years of being sidelined, of being treated like background noise, I needed to feel like I could still trust my instincts. The more I read, the more the puzzle clicked. Payments shuffled between entities, delayed vendor invoices. Lindsay's boutique receiving consulting fees from Adam's business. Nothing illegal on the surface, but messy, suspicious, and definitely unethical. I printed everything I found, built a folder, not for revenge, for clarity, because for the first time I didn't feel powerless, I felt prepared. A week later, I bumped into Kyla outside a pharmacy. She looked surprised to see me, but smiled. Noah, wow. It's been years. We talked casually for a few minutes. I kept it light, but near the end, I asked gently, "Still working with Lindsay?" She rolled her eyes. "Unfortunately, she's got big vision, no structure. It's like trying to file glitter." "And Adam's still involved?" I asked. "Too involved," she said, then hesitated. "But you didn't hear that from me." I nodded. You have my word. She smiled again, a little softer this time. Good seeing you, Noah. Really. That night, I added a post-it to the folder. Not crazy, just ignored. The next few weeks passed quietly. I went to work, I kept to myself, I smiled when required. But inside, something had shifted. For the first time in years, I felt like I was holding the pen in my own story. I didn't plan revenge, I planned perspective. If a reckoning came and I was starting to believe it might, I wouldn't shout. I'd speak clearly, calmly, like someone who had done the work because I had. All my life, I'd tried to earn love by being harmless, by not rocking the boat, but love built on silence isn't love, it's theater. And I was done playing my part. I've always been good with patterns. It's what makes me good at my job, noticing discrepancies and data spotting anomalies before they become problems. So once I started digging into Adam's finances, it was less like cracking a code and more like watching a slow unravel. I began with the obvious public permits. I pulled records from the city planning department. Projects Adam had posted on his business page were sometimes months behind, though the city had them listed as complete. One permit had been renewed 3 times with no final inspection. Another was closed out with no record of subcontractors. Odd. Next came the financials. I filed a Freedom of Information request to access property liens connected to his developments. One name kept popping up, an old LLC long dormant that Lindsay supposedly dissolved when she launched her boutique. Yet here it was, receiving consulting payments from Adam's company. I dug deeper. On one Saturday afternoon, I sat cross-legged on my living room floor, surrounded by printouts, notes, and a whiteboard I'd borrowed from the office. My cat Darcy watched from the couch like a silent supervisor. I mapped out transactions. Some bounced between entities. Others were funneled through short-term vendor contracts with shell addresses. One payment labeled event coordination. Family budget stood out. Family budget, that was the term my parents used for the joint emergency fund, a legacy from my grandfather meant to be a fallback for health issues or home repairs. I called the credit union. I still had partial access because I used to help Mom with her tax prep. The last time I checked the fund was around $80,000. Now it showed just over $29,000. $50,000 gone, withdrawn 6 months ago in 3 separate wire transfers. I stared at the screen so long my coffee went cold. That night I didn't sleep. I laid on my back, staring at the ceiling, heart thudding in rhythm with the ticking wall clock. All the years of being talked over, shrugged aside, told to lighten up. They echoed in a new light. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't about cookies or birthday invites or awkward silences at family brunches. This was theft. This was betrayal. And it was hidden in paperwork they assumed no one would ever look at. I printed the bank records, clipped them into my folder, and labeled the T50,000. From there, the trail widened. 2 contractors Adam had hired had filed complaints with the state licensing board, one for unpaid work, another for altered invoices. Yelp reviews began to read differently. The ones I had brushed off as noise now painted a picture. Late payments, missing receipts, projects abandoned midway. I contacted one reviewer, a woman named Denise, and asked if she'd be willing to speak. She agreed, cautious but curious. We met at a bookstore cafe. He talked big, she said, stirring her tea. Said he had city connections, promised a quick turnaround. Then things went weird, delays, extra charges. When I pushed back, he ghosted me. I showed her the name of the LLC that billed her. She squinted, then nodded. That's the one. But it wasn't even on the original contract. I thanked her and she patted my hand gently. Good luck. Guys like him don't think anyone's watching. I was watching. The more I uncovered, the more steady I felt. Not vindicated, just certain. I wasn't making things up. I wasn't bitter or petty, I was just paying attention. My apartment slowly transformed into a private investigation hub. Color-coded folders, spreadsheets of transactions, a Google Drive backup password protected and labeled with a fake project name. I kept everything methodical: dates, amounts, scanned documents. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't leaking. I was building. One evening, while copying files to a thumb drive, I paused. My reflection in the dark window stared back. Same tired eyes, same plain clothes. But something was different. I wasn't shrinking anymore. I was standing up, not for revenge, for truth. And soon I would speak it aloud. The envelope sat on my kitchen table like it held a live wire, cream-colored, thick, tucked under a manila folder bursting with documentation, bank statements, public records, screenshots of reviews, scanned permits, emails from contractors. And at the top, a summary page with bullet points. Concise, neutral, undeniable. I had rewritten it 4 times, each version stripped of emotion. Just facts, because facts were safer, harder to dismiss. I stared at it for an hour. Then I picked up the phone and called Kyla. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Noah, do you have a minute?" I asked. "Sure. What's up?" "I need to verify something I said, off the record." She was quiet for a moment. "Okay. Did Lindsay ever request a transfer labeled Event Coordination Family Budget to her LLC?" Another pause. Then she did. I flagged it. Adam said it was reimbursed, but I never saw proof. I closed my eyes. "Thank you." "Noah, is everything okay?" "Not really, but it will be." I hung up gently, heart pounding. That night I sealed the folder and wrote on the envelope, "For family eyes only." I wasn't sure who would open it first. Dad, maybe. He always read things twice. Or Mom, who might flip through while stirring a pot of soup, but I hoped it would be Adam. I wanted him to see that silence didn't mean ignorance, that kindness didn't mean weakness. I wasn't angry, I was resolved. Still, my hands shook as I tucked the envelope into my coat pocket. Truth is, doing the right thing doesn't come with trumpets. It comes with a dry throat, a pit in your stomach, the fear of being wrong, of being dismissed again. But I kept going. I rehearsed what I'd say, short, calm, no accusations, just, "I think we should all look at this together." Because the truth deserved a voice. And I was done being quiet. I drove to my parents' house the next morning. Not a holiday, just a Saturday. Leaves skittered across the driveway. The porch light was still on. I could see movement in the kitchen. I stood at the door for a full minute before knocking. Mom opened it, surprised. "Noah, everything okay?" "I need to talk to everyone," I said. "It's important." Her brows furrowed, but she nodded. "Let me get your father." 10 minutes later, we sat in the living room. Adam lounged on the couch, phone in hand. Lindsay perched beside him. My parents shared the love seat. I placed the envelope on the coffee table. "What's this?" Adam asked. "Information," I said. "I've been looking into some financial inconsistencies." "I think you all deserve to see it." Lindsay rolled her eyes. "Are you serious?" "I am," I replied. Adam scoffed. "What are you auditing me now?" "No," I said. "I'm asking for accountability. There's a difference." My voice didn't shake. My spine stayed straight. No yelling, no guilt-tripping, just truth. Dad picked up the envelope, and I exhaled. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to earn my place. I was reclaiming it. Thanksgiving came again, heavy with its own weight. The turkey browned in the oven, the pies cooled on the windowsill, and the dining table sparkled with its usual effort to cover what lay beneath. Polished silver embroidered napkins, crystal glasses, all disguises. None strong enough to hide the cracks. We sat down like nothing had changed. Small talk, laughter, clinking glasses. But beneath the surface, tension thrummed like a taut wire. My mother was nervous. Her eyes flicked toward me too often. My father smiled too tightly. Lindsay didn't meet my gaze. Adam, as always, tried to take control of the room. I waited until the dishes were cleared, until pie plates sat scraped clean and wine glasses refilled. Then I stood. "I have something to share," I said. Chairs creaked. Forks paused mid-air. All eyes turned to me. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a fresh envelope identical to the one from last week. I'd brought copies. Because part of me knew what was coming. This is something I think we need to face as a family. I passed it across the table to my father. Adam leaned back. "Again with the drama, no," I said calmly. "With the truth." Lindsay crossed her arms. "We've already addressed this." "No," I replied. "You deflected. This time you'll listen." My father opened the envelope, pulled out the summary sheet. His eyes moved slowly, line by line. He handed it to my mother, who began reading aloud without meaning to, just mouthing the words, her lips barely moving. Adam's voice broke the silence. "This is ridiculous. Anyone can pull records and twist numbers. It's all cited," I said. "Permits, transfers." Kyla confirmed the payments. "Are you seriously taking Kyla's word over your own brother's?" I didn't answer. "Because he already knew." Lindsay stood. "This is harassment. It's a vendetta. You've always been jealous. Jealous of fraud," I asked. "Of being ignored." The room grew heavier. No one moved. Then my father clutched his chest suddenly. A sharp gasp. "Dad," I said, stepping forward. He hunched over. "Chest tight." Mom cried out, "Call 911." Adam froze. I pulled out my phone and made the call. My hands were steady, my voice clear. Years of being overlooked had taught me to function under pressure. The ambulance came quickly. They took him, oxygen mask over his mouth, my mother climbing in beside him. We followed behind in silence. At the hospital we waited. Lindsay paced. Adam stared at the floor. I sat still, replaying every word in my mind, wondering if I should have waited, though knowing it wouldn't have changed what needed to be said. Hours passed. A nurse finally emerged. "He's stable," she said. It was mild. "He'll need rest, but he'll be okay." Relief didn't come as a wave. It was a slow, uncertain thaw. My mother appeared, her coat draped over her arm. Her expression was worn, weary. She sat next to me. I read everything she said. Her voice was quiet. "I believe you." I nodded, unable to speak. "I think," she added, glancing down the hallway. "We all knew something was off. We just didn't want to see it." Silence hung between us, and in that silence, understanding. Inside the room, my father slept. A heart monitor beeped slowly. I watched it for a long time, its steady rhythm grounding me. Later, back at the house, the remains of the feast sat untouched. Cold stuffing, dry turkey, pie slices congealing on plates. Adam stood in the kitchen, arms crossed. "You broke the family," he said. "No," I said. "The rot did. I just pointed to it. You humiliated us. Him, he deserved the truth. We all did." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he turned away. Lindsay didn't speak at all. She simply left, quiet, head high. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to follow or explain. Because the truth had been spoken, and no one could unhear it. The cost was high. A fracture in the family that would take time to mend if it ever did. But it was real, honest, earned, and I could finally breathe. Sometimes healing begins in the ashes, and sometimes courage looks like passing an envelope across a table and refusing to sit back down. The fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor buzzed faintly, a constant white noise that mirrored the static in my mind. I sat by the window with a lukewarm coffee, watching nurses come and go, their shoes squeaking softly on the polished floors. Lindsay found me there, still in her holiday dress, makeup smudged under her eyes. Her arms were folded tightly, not from the cold, but from restraint. "You couldn't have waited until after the holidays?" she asked, her voice sharp and low. I didn't look at her. There's no right time to tell the truth when someone's been lying. She shook her head. "You always play the victim. But this was cruel. You embarrassed Adam, nearly killed your father, and for what? To prove you're better than us. That's not what this is about," I said calmly. "And if you're more concerned about embarrassment than accountability, that says enough." Her eyes narrowed. "You're unbelievable." "No," I replied. "I'm finally believable." "That's the difference." She didn't respond, just turned and walked away. Inside the hospital room, Dad stirred. Machines beeped softly. Mom was seated beside him, holding his hand. His eyes opened slowly. "Hey," I said, stepping in. He blinked, then gave a faint smile. "Noah, you scared us," I whispered. "I scared myself," he replied, his voice hoarse. There was a long pause. Then he said, "Your envelope." I read it again. "With your mother." I held my breath. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner," he said. "I should have protected you. I failed at that." I swallowed. "You didn't fail, you just didn't know." "I do now." He reached out a hand. I took it. "I'll talk to Adam," he said. "There has to be consequences." I nodded. Mom looked at me. "What will you do?" I pulled a second envelope from my jacket. "I'm calling the police." She stiffened. "I have to," I said. "If it were anyone else who took that money, anyone outside this family, would we protect them?" Dad squeezed my hand. "No, we wouldn't." I stepped out of the hospital, the late autumn air crisp against my skin. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, but my resolve was heavier. I dialed the non-emergency line. "Portland Police Department. How may I help you?" "My name is Noah Walsh. I have documents concerning financial fraud involving family business assets. I'd like to file a report." The officer was professional, courteous. He scheduled a meeting for Monday. That night I scanned every document, labeled everything digitally, and wrote a detailed account. I backed it up to 3 separate drives, because justice deserved clarity. Monday came quickly. I sat across from a detective in a nondescript office, watching him leaf through the papers. He asked questions, took notes. "This is thorough," he said, "very organized." "I'm an analyst," I replied. "Details are what I do." He smiled. "You've done half our job already." I left the station lighter, not vindicated that would take time, but relieved. Later that week, Adam called. "You really went through with it," he said, his voice flat. "I had to. They're investigating now. You've torn this family apart." "No," I said, "you did that. I just stopped pretending it wasn't broken." He hung up. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of truth, of consequence, of peace. Justice doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like a quiet room, a sleeping father, and a name finally cleared. And for the first time, I was okay with that. The apartment in Portland was small but bright, with large windows that let in the morning light and a gentle creak in the hardwood floors that felt lived in. For the first time in years, I lived alone without feeling lonely. There were no footsteps echoing down a hallway that didn't welcome me. No carefully measured silences or awkward glances, just the hum of the fridge, the chirp of passing traffic, and my own breath. I'd never realized how heavy the air had been until I no longer had to hold mine. Work was steady. My firm appreciated diligence and discretion, 2 qualities I had long honed. But it wasn't the job that made me feel renewed. It was the way people listened when I spoke. Not out of obligation, but with interest. For the first time, my thoughts carried weight outside a conference room. They mattered, and so did I. Still, something felt unfinished, like I had rebuilt the house but hadn't painted the walls. Portland gave me stability, but I needed purpose. One afternoon in January, I saw a flyer pinned to a corkboard at a local cafe. Volunteer mentors needed. Tech and life skills for teens. I pulled the tab at the bottom before I finished my coffee. The organization was small-housed in a red brick community center that smelled faintly of floor polish and new paper. Once a week, I taught a workshop on data basics, budgeting, and digital literacy. The kids were between 13 and 17, sharp and funny and occasionally wary. I didn't blame them. I recognized the look, that quiet, cautious hope that someone might actually see them. And for once, I had something to offer that didn't require approval, just presence. One girl, Tasha, sat in the back corner every session. Never raised her hand, never smiled, but she showed up, and she took notes. I learned she lived with her aunt. She was good at math but struggled with self-confidence. A month in, we had a class on resume writing. I mentioned how I once spent years working hard without recognition, how easy it was to internalize being overlooked. Tasha looked up. Our eyes met. After class, she lingered. "You really get what it's like?" she asked. "I do," I said. She nodded and left without another word. The next week, she handed me a card, construction paper, purple marker. Inside, in small, neat handwriting, it said, "You made me feel seen." I stared at it for a long time. Of all the words I had wanted from my family, none meant more than that sentence from a teenage girl I barely knew. It echoed in places I hadn't yet healed. I pinned the card above my desk at home, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't always come in dramatic scenes or grand gestures. Sometimes it arrives as quiet mornings, as small victories, as the knowledge that you matter to someone. The real gift wasn't the card, it was what it represented, that in showing up I could make a difference. I still visited my parents, less often but more meaningfully. My father's health stabilized, my mother smiled more, Adam kept his distance, and maybe that was for the best. Lindsay had moved away. The legal process was slow but ongoing. There were consequences, there was change, but most importantly, there was space for truth, for growth, for me, and eventually for forgiveness on my terms. Volunteering turned into something more. I started helping the center develop curriculum. Then I co-hosted a citywide tech fair for underserved students. I spoke on a podcast about using tech for equity. People began reaching out, asking for advice, mentorship, input. And I said yes. Because the quiet boy at the Thanksgiving table finally had something worth saying. And as I stood before my next class of students, whiteboard marker in hand, I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. Because sometimes the greatest gift we can offer or receive is to be seen, and to know we are enough. Even now, when I feel unsure or small, I reach for Tasha's card. I read her words and I keep going. The letter came in early spring. It arrived without fanfare in a plain envelope with familiar handwriting. I recognized it instantly. Lindsay. I didn't open it right away. I left it on the kitchen counter while I watered the plants, made tea, checked my email, and swept the hallway. It sat there like a question I wasn't sure I wanted to answer. When I finally opened it, her words were unexpected. Not defensive or bitter, but measured, thoughtful, an apology. She wrote about shame, about realizing how much harm could be done by exclusion even if it was never said aloud, about how easy it was to follow Adam's lead and pretend the silence wasn't a form of violence. She didn't ask for forgiveness, only understanding, and she hoped someday for peace. I folded the letter, sat with it for a moment, then walked to the fireplace. The paper caught easily, curling at the edges, turning to ash within seconds. Not out of anger, not out of cruelty, but because I didn't need it. The act of apology, even if late, had reached me, and I no longer needed to carry it. That weekend my mother visited. She brought a box of citrus from the farmer's market, and we drank tea in my living room, watching the sun stretch across the rug. She didn't mention the past, not directly, but her eyes lingered on the photos on my wall, my students, the tech fair, a shot of me and Tasha holding her scholarship certificate. "You've built something good here," she said. "I've tried." She reached for my hand, held it. Her eyes said everything else. Later, after she left, I opened my journal, a habit I'd picked up again, small entries, just thoughts to anchor myself. I wrote, "I no longer need a seat at the old table. I've built my own," and I meant it. Because healing hadn't come through confrontation. It had come through creation, through showing up for others, through carving out space where kindness led and presence mattered. I thought about the boy I had been, quiet, hopeful, always on the fringe. And I thought about the man I'd become, steady, intentional, no longer waiting for permission to belong. There's a certain peace in realizing that being seen doesn't always require spotlight or applause. Sometimes it's found in a student's thank you, a mother's quiet visit, a room you've made your own. Sometimes it's found in the act of letting go. I looked around my home, the books, the photos, the cards still pinned above my desk. I didn't need to go back. Not to prove anything, not to win. I had arrived, and I was home. The days moved forward gently. I kept teaching, expanding our program to partner with local libraries and shelters. We launched an initiative for job readiness, mock interviews, digital portfolios, and professional mentorships. The kids showed up with stories, challenges, and resilience that continually reminded me what strength really looked like. Each Friday, I'd write a recap, one story, one moment that mattered. Sometimes it was about a kid who aced a quiz after failing two. Sometimes it was just about someone saying thank you when they usually didn't speak. One evening, I reread them. 52 entries, one for each week, a full year. I smiled. This was the story I wanted to write all along. Not about revenge, not about exposing fraud, but about becoming, about reclaiming space, about offering what I once needed. On the anniversary of that fateful Thanksgiving, I didn't dread the day. I made my own meal, set a place for myself, not out of loneliness but ritual. I made lemon chicken, roasted carrots, and pumpkin pie. I placed a candle at the center of the table, and I toasted silently to peace, to truth, to the table I built. Sometimes the greatest act of closure isn't a confrontation. It's the quiet decision to carry on, to nourish yourself, to bless your present with presence. And as the candle flickered gently, I knew the gift of being seen starts with seeing yourself.